Tonight, dinner is served. Finally. Only took us weeks to get to dinner. So last week an invitation was given and an invitation was accepted. And just as the brothers were expressing all their concerns to Joseph's steward at the door of the house, the steward offered his peace. He gave them his peace, which really reminds me of the Holy Spirit, because the steward's representing Joseph, and it's just the same way the Holy Spirit represents God and gives us his peace, doesn't he? He provides his peace for us, and we kind of talked about that last week. But going back to kind of where we left off, in Genesis 43:23, well, maybe we're going back, provided the buttons all froze again. Why is this like every other week, the buttons freeze? Very strange. I guess so. It's like, last week it moved, this week it's frozen again, which is strange. Where's my button? Let's see if it moves this time. Woohoo! Okay. So, but in 43:23 was like the last verse we had read last time we were together. And the words, your God and the God of your father, is what the steward said to the brothers. Gives a real strong indication. Most commentators feel that he's expressing whether he believes or not, he knows what the Hebrew faith is from Joseph. That Joseph's still probably continuing to witness to those around him. And he realizes that he's talking to Hebrews, the brothers, and he's giving them some advice. He's telling them to look to your God, the God of your fathers. He's giving them a big reminder of where to turn to look to. It's a reminder to us that sometimes the world is watching us, and the way we act, the things we do, they're noticing. Here they are being a bit frantic and concerned about their situation, thinking they're going to get accused of stealing, right? And so they've been expressing all this concern to him. He's saying, you need to look to your God, the God of your fathers. And when the world does that to us, when someone you know that's not saved is looking at you, watching you, and they tell you about your faith, or why aren't you living up to your faith, that's kind of a bad place to be. You really don't want to be in that place. So just try to remember your God and the God of your fathers and your faith when you're dealing with people around you and how you respond to your situations, because it's kind of bad to be put in place by someone who's lost. Have you ever had that happen to you? They'll say, why aren't you doing that? Why are you acting that way? Don't you believe in God? So you don't really want to be there. What, Debbie?
I said, don't you really believe?
Yeah. Because if we're fretting and worrying, to them, it makes them no different than them. Oh, yeah, children will do it. You're right. Yeah, they're fast to remind you. Oh, that's even worse probably too, huh? So anyway, it's a reminder to us to be aware of those we're around, and that we have a testimony, and we need to live out our faith because they are watching us. And you want to be the best witness possible, actually living out what you believe. So if you're busy fretting over a situation and expressing it constantly, or you're busy being angry about a situation and you're expressing it constantly, to them it appears that your God is no different than anything else they're experiencing. And you want them to see the difference in you. So the stewards just kind of bring this back to mind for these brothers. So let's go on to where we left, where we're supposed to start, which is 43:24. So the man brought them into Joseph's house and gave them water, and he washed their feet, and he gave their donkeys feed. So they're being treated with uttermost kindness and hospitality. And it's not uncommon in that culture to have your feet washed when you came in somewhere, because they're wearing their sandals, they're dirty. But this is a lot of unusual kindness because of who they are. They're Hebrews. And this is a great Egyptian ruler's house who really wouldn't have anything normally to do with these types of people in their minds. So this is a real unusual situation. And if you think about it, yes?
And I was just gonna say, that weren't they the lowest because they're shepherds?
They're shepherds, so they're even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're even worse. So they're very unworthy in the Egyptians' eyes. And if you think about it spiritually, they're unworthy because they have not repented to Joseph yet about what they did to him. That's still kind of hanging over their head. And yet Joseph is allowing his stewards and his servants to treat them extremely kindly, you know, even though they don't deserve it. So they who are unworthy are being served with kindness and mercy.
Unworthy?
Unworthy, did I spell it wrong?
No, you said unworthy instead of.
Did I say it wrong?
You said unworthy.
Yeah, you said unworthy. That is unworthy.
Yeah, they who are unworthy, they are
She
deemed.
said- You said the opposite of what's up there.
Oh,
I heard you say it the right way.
thank you.
Brown noses. Well,
Sorry.
apple bringer.
Okay, so this reminds me of another case where people who were unworthy were being served. Oh, don't freeze up. There. So John 13, 12 through 17. So when he had washed their feet, taken his garments, and sat down again, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than he who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them." So as Christians, we are called to be kind, hospitable, and servants to others. Not hospital, but hospitable. Hospitable. Gotta speed it up. Hospitable. So, and that's just as much as Joseph and his Egyptian servants are showing this kindness and servitude towards who they deem unworthy. And you think about Jesus being above us all, and he washed his servant's feet, sinful man's feet. We're called to be the same way. We're supposed to be as loving and kind, even to those we think that are unworthy, that we may have in our life or that we may encounter in our life. We're supposed to be hospitable. And that's your word for the night.
Simple.
Simple, yeah. Claudia, simple. That's your word for tonight. So here's some verses about that. There's lots of verses about us having that right attitude and behavior. Galatians 6:10, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all, especially to those who are of the household of faith. So especially to our brothers and sisters here at church and other Christians we know in the community, we are to be kind and hospitable and do good to them. Starts with a household of faith. But it goes beyond that. With goodwill, doing service as to the Lord and not to men. So there's your focus. When you're doing things, the Lord is your focus. Even when you're dealing with unworthy types, as you might think, you know, if they're not your normal group of people you'd be with, you know, we do it as unto the Lord. 1 Timothy 5:10, well reported for good works, if she has brought up children, if she has lodged strangers, if she has washed the saints' feet, I can't even talk. If she has relieved the afflicted, if she has diligently followed every good work. So that's a list of things that you should be doing. Have you ever lodged strangers?
I lodged Demars.
Yes, that's right. You did in the very beginning.
Like for a month or something?
Yeah. And thanks to Connie lodging that weird stranger over there, she came to our church. which was a blessing, huh? And then her husband followed her.
Where you said that the Lord smacked you.
Yeah, he did. I was sitting there with
The Lord
Dave,
spanked.
and I said, the Lord smacked me in the back of the head. It's like, why don't you ask for us to come stay with you?
Mhm.
Yeah, 3 extra bedrooms, so.
Yeah, see?
I
And that,
told her, he smacked me in the head.
and that's the way it should be. Not that he necessarily smacks you in the head, but he tells you, you know, you don't want to just necessarily go take every stranger you find, like you pick up 20 off the corner and bring them home. You do need to know that the Lord's telling you what to do. You want to be in his will, and he'll guide you, as he found crazy Damaris over there and sent her to Connie. Huh?
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Everything is a curie.
Yeah.
Oh, Curie. I thought she said Curie. We had people in our house we didn't know after, we didn't even have we didn't have any curtains yet, that's right. I had to go get a shower curtain. It was those missionaries, I mean, we had only been in the house like a week. When the Singermans, was it?
Oh, uh-huh. Yep. So there's lots of ways to show kindness, and that's probably one of the harder ones, to lodge strangers. That'd be a different.
It's also such a blessing.
Yeah, it would be a blessing, especially if you know you're following the Lord's, command on that. And then 1 Peter 4:9, be hospitable to one another without grumbling. Sometimes that happens, huh? You decide to be hospitable, but then get a little cranky about it. But we're
And
not.
how long they stay?
Yeah. It's like, it's time for you to go.
Oh, wait, you're about to say?
A 3-day mattress, so that they.
That's what Grandpa said.
Oh my
Bible
gosh.
does talk about wearing out your welcome, doesn't it?
Oh, I don't have to look at that. I don't know if that's a man.
Fish and coffee smell.
I think that was in 1 John, right? I don't know. I'd have to look that up. I don't know if that's just a proverb from mankind or if that's a Bible.
He wrote a lot about the fish.
Too much of your.
What, Debbie?
In Proverbs. In Proverbs.
You think it's in Proverbs?
About your don't go to your friends
Yeah.
for too long.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But Chris said she left her message.
Oh,
I'm telling you.
I bought some tacos for a homeless man the other night. Good job.
Bless your heart.
See, I have to really focus in to see what you're writing, Chris, because, I'm going
And tell
blind.
her to bring the tacos for us.
Next time, tacos for here in Kalinga.
I thought she said chocolate.
No. They want chocolate too.
It goes to show you hear what you want to hear.
And then, okay, so let's continue on in our story. Genesis 43:25. Then they made the present ready for Joseph's coming at noon, for they heard that they would eat bread there. So do you remember what the present was? Go back in verse 11. And their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then do this. Take some of the best fruits of the land in your vessels and carry down a present for the man, a little balm, a little honey, spices and myrrh, pistachio, nuts and almonds. So it was a very small gift, because remember we had that whole discussion about, well, if they had food, why did they have to go buy, or take, go down and buy grain? But the difference was they just had very little, some honey, some balm, and some nuts. They didn't have much to live on. So they got this little gift ready for him. So, oh yeah, and they gave him the silver back, yeah. So, verse 26, and when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house and bowed down before him to the earth. So, no doubt, Joseph has just come back from doing Pharaoh's work, distributing grain to the people in need. He's come home for this lunchtime feast with his brothers. And the first thing they do is hand him the present and bow down.
Like rain.
Yeah.
Is that what?
Yep, they bow down. So all the brothers this time. So now he's seeing his first dream completely fulfilled. All the brothers are bowing down very low, very humbly, mostly out of fear of their lives, because what did we say last couple of weeks? They have to prove themselves honest men or they will die. That was his last words to them. And part of proving themselves honest was bringing Benjamin back with them, and they brought Benjamin back. So now they're presenting this gift and bowing very low. Do you remember what they said to him when he had the dreams? Ever so many lessons ago. Genesis 37:20.
How dare you?
They said, "Come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit. And we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams." So what became of his dreams? They were fulfilled. Their little plots and plans did not work a bit. And Kelly Mentor had this to say about that. She goes, "It reminds me of an unshakable truth for those of us who are sons and daughters of the one true God. No one on earth can shatter a dream whose source is in God. As much as the brothers thought they could destroy Joseph and therefore destroy his dreams, the brothers were no match for the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And that's so true for us too. You know, God may give you a dream, and it could take years to pass. Look how long Joseph's dream took to pass. Over 20 years, over 20 years. This could be like 23 years in. And he's just now seeing the dream God gave him come to pass. Sometimes it takes patience. So if you feel God's told you something, don't give up just because it didn't happen the next day or a month from now. It could be a long time. So, because if God's given it to you, like Kelly Mentor said, it's going to happen. It's his dream. It's his promise to you. So don't give up. Just keep plugging along. Philippians 1:6 says, "Being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ." He had a work for Joseph to do. It may have taken a long time to get it all accomplished, to get him trained and ready and there, and get the brothers in the right place at the right time. But then now it's come to pass. No matter what God decides to do, it's going to come to pass. People can't stop it. So as God began a good work in Joseph and will complete it, so he will in each of us. The promise to us that he's going to do good work in us and he's going to get it done. So these brothers are bowing down and presenting a present to basically who is almost king, second in command of Egypt. They're bowing down, and who does Joseph represent? Jesus, God. He represents God in the whole storyline, and they're bowing down, giving them their present very humbly. It's a scene that is foreshadowing something that we get to participate in much later in our lives. Would be nice if it was like tomorrow, but I don't think it will be, but who knows. So Revelation 4:9-11. "Whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who sits on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who sits on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever, and cast their crowns before the throne, saying, 'You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they exist and were created.'" Can you imagine being in that place where you're finally there, where we're before the Lord and we're offering our gift of our crowns to him and throwing them down at his throne? What a wonderful time. You know, those verses like that are things that we can cling on to when we're having bad days here on earth. You know, something to look forward to, a beautiful future. So one day, one great day in our future, we will have the opportunity to bow down before our King and present the gift of our crowns before his throne. Yes?
Chris had a message, because I was just about to ask you this. She says, wow, exactly what we studied in my Bible study.
Oh.
But there was discussion about who the 24 elders were. And I told her what I've always thought.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a message for
You
She
know,
didn't ask that, but
I've heard different theories.
things,
The 24 elders are the 12 disciples and the 12 leaders of Israel. I don't think there's any way we could 100% know, but that's
the only
theory.
one I've ever been taught, so
Yeah.
I told her, but other people haven't.
I don't know if anybody else has heard anything, but that's what I was always taught. But there's no way to know because there's nothing in the Bible that tells us exactly who they are. We just know they're leaders, 24 elders. And those seem to make the most sense. The Old Testament and the New Testament being represented, you know, the old saints and the new saints, you know, being represented. So I don't know. But we will get to witness it all, and we get our opportunity to be there and to bow and to worship God. So back to our story, Genesis 43:27. Then he asked them about their well-being and said, "Is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke? Is he still alive?" And they answered, "Your servant our father is in good health. He is still alive." And they bowed their heads down and prostrated themselves. So they bowed down. He asked them a question. He doesn't seem to say anything about their gift. Just there's nothing written down about whether Moses didn't think it was important or whether maybe Joseph didn't think anything about their gift. Maybe it was so small it didn't matter. Or more importantly was his family. He's concerned about his family, and that's where he focused. He went right to conversation about his family. So he wanted to know about his father. And what did they do? They're bowed down. They lift their head, maybe one of them, and to answer, and right back down, straight into that humble position. Because at this point, they still don't know their fate. They still don't know what Joseph's going to do with them. You know, whether he's going to say, "Off with your heads," or "into prison with you all," or, you know, we have no clue. So, you know, did he at this point, did he deem them honest men because Benjamin's back with them? You know, there's just no clue at this point. But the interesting thing is they understand their position. They are humble before this leader, before this king. And that's the same thing that's expected of us with our Lord. We are expected to be humble in his presence, humble in our, you know, behavior. And there's a lot of pride out there in this world, and unfortunately a lot of people don't want to humble themselves before the Lord. They don't want to make him their Lord and Savior. They don't want him in control of their lives. But basically all mankind is in the same predicament. Are you going to live or are you going to die? Are you going to humble yourself and put yourself down before God and be humble now while you're here on earth, or are you going to find out too late when the time comes for judgment, and then you're made to be humble? There's no choice about it. You have to give in and be humble. Romans 14:10 through 12 says, "But why do you judge your brother, or why do you show contempt for your brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Christ," just like these men are standing before Joseph. "For it is written, as I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to God. So then each of us shall give account of himself to God." Just like these guys, they're having to give account to Joseph, basically, prove themselves to him. We're going to have to fess up to God about ourselves. He knows already. He knows what we've done with our lives here on earth. But you don't want to be in that situation. You don't want to make it all the way to the judgment seat and try to answer for yourself. You don't want to be in that boat. Now is the time to be humble. And it's a shame that people struggle with this so much. This original passage came from Isaiah 45, and it said, "I've sworn by myself, the word has gone out of my mouth in righteousness, and shall not return, that to me every knee shall bow, every tongue shall take an oath." Everybody. There's going to be no way out of it. So one day, whether a person believes in God now or not, all will be bowing down before him humbly, confessing who he is. Just so many amazing pictures in this story of Joseph. It blows my mind every time I read or study these passages. So it's far better now to confess Jesus as Lord and to bow down and be humble, right? Who wants to go before the judgment seat and face second death? I would not want to. It's amazing how many people say, well, if there's no parties in heaven, I'd rather go to hell and party there. It's like, what are you even thinking? It blows my mind that you would even think that way. It's like terrible. Hebrews 3:7 through 12 says, therefore, as the Holy Spirit says, today if you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion in the day of trial in the wilderness, where your fathers tested me, tried me, and saw my works 40 years. Therefore I was angry with that generation and said, they always go astray in their heart, and they have not known my ways. So I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. Beware, brethren, lest there be any of you an evil heart of unbelief departing from the living God. So it's a picture in the wilderness of what Israel's rebellion led them to. They couldn't even enter the promised land or into God's rest, his peace. They don't want to get to that place in life. So back to our story in Genesis, verse 29. Then he lifted his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, is this your younger brother of whom you spoke to me? And he said, God be gracious to you, my son. Now his heart yearned for his brother, so Joseph made haste and sought somewhere to weep. And he went into his chamber and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out, and he restrained himself and said, serve the bread. So he figures out that the youngest man there's got to be Benjamin. Now, you got to know, Benjamin, when he left, was probably 4 years old. He was just a little kid. Here he is a grown man. He's probably 25 or more years old at this point in his life. So he's never seen Benjamin as an adult. So there's no wonder why he's asking, is this Benjamin? He's figuring it most likely is, but he's getting confirmation. And it just brings so much emotion to him. He has to rush out of the room and cry in private so that they don't see or figure out what's going on. And he gets himself together and comes back out and says, serve the bread. When I saw that he asked right off the bat to serve the bread, I just in my head, I don't know if it's a God thing or what, I tried to find, commentary on this little section, this verse about this, but to me, it looked like, since Joseph represents Jesus, and his brothers were all at the table kind of representing Israel and disciples in that sense, it reminded me of Jesus when he broke bread with the disciples at the Last Supper. And I don't know if that's the way God really intended it picture-wise, or if that's just me, but I just thought that was interesting. That's where he starts. Break the bread, serve the bread. That's where he starts dinner with his brothers. Or maybe that was tradition. I don't know. For me, being his representation as Christ, it just seemed so symbolic to me, a picture of it. So this is what I put in there. This breaking of the bread with his brothers seems symbolic of the Last Supper with Jesus. But since I'm not a great scholar, and I with what commentaries I was reading, I couldn't find anybody. It's odd how sometimes you can find verses that nobody talks about. It's like I'm just either not in the right commentaries or what, I don't know, but I couldn't find anything to support my feelings about it. So just something to think about. I don't, So
I thought of that too.
it came to it just looks like that to me, but yeah. So Genesis 43:32 says, so they set him a place by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination of the Egyptians. So they put Joseph at his own table because he's the ruler, he's the elite, he's the special person, so he gets his own table. That's what was common. The Hebrews, all the brothers, they're at their own table.
The kids' table.
The kids' table. They're at the kids' table. That's right. And then the Egyptians, so apparently there were Egyptians invited to eat at this. Now, whether these are people that normally ate with Joseph all the time, because you know how the rulers always had set guests all the time with them that they provided for. I don't know who these Egyptians are, but they're Egyptians at their own table. And there's a reason, we know it's because they don't eat with them, but do you know the reason why they don't eat with Hebrews? It's not just even Hebrews they won't eat with. They don't want to eat with shepherds. Before Joseph's time period, not long before his time period, the pharaohs that were in charge were a group of people called the Hyksos. They were outsiders who had basically taken over Egypt and were the pharaohs for a while. And they ran Egypt, but guess who they were and where they came from? They were from the land of Canaan, and they were all shepherds. So at a certain point...
Are you talking about the beginning of Egyptian history?
No, it's before this time period. Egyptian history's been for a while. And when the
Spell that.
here, watch. The previous line of Egyptians kings
I was about to write that.
was known as the Hyksos, which meant shepherd kings, and they came specifically from Canaan, the same place the Hebrews are coming from. So they just don't like shepherds from the land of Canaan. And they don't want them in their land, really. So it's pretty amazing that God works this out and gets Joseph into a position of leadership again after their history. That's pretty amazing. I mean, talk about really influencing the current Pharaoh at that time. I understand the caste system, and sure, they have a system of rulers versus lower people, but this is a disdain for, we don't want them to come back in and take over our land, you know. So, as a result of the Hyksos history, the Egyptians did not want to, oh look, my words are backwards, want to eat with the shepherds at the same table. And this is what multiple commentaries said, Claudia.
Pardon?
This is what multiple commentaries said.
I'm sorry, I was just telling you what this said. I don't care. I don't want to eat with them either.
Oh, why? They got all the sheep.
They probably don't smell very good.
That's exactly right.
It's interesting because you read a lot of different commentaries. Some comment on some things, some don't. Sometimes there's differing opinions. And then I see some differences between commentaries between denominations. And so it's always interesting to read a lot of different commentaries, and you kind of got to look at it all and make a decision, you know, what makes the most sense or whatever. But there's always differences.
So the Hyksos is only in biblical history? It's not in regular history?
No, it's in history.
That's why I want to know how to look it up. Hyksos?
I'd look up Hyksos.
Okay.
But the way I was reading it was, I don't know, several hundred years of Hyksos running Egypt. You know, they ran Egypt for a while. They finally got kicked out, and the Egyptians came back into power. So it was some dominating group of shepherds who showed up and took over. And I was thinking about, I have to look it up because I never got back to that. You know, who were they? Do they know who the Hyksos were exactly? I don't know, because I was thinking about
Fascinating.
the Syrians throughout time I know that the Syrians was it Syrians or Syrians? Syrians came into Egypt and were rulers for a while, and I don't know if they were considered part of the Hyksos group or not. I'm trying to remember if it's Syrians or Assyrians. I always get it mixed up, but anyway. Anyway, there's lots of theories about that too, you know, as far as pharaohs go, but anyway. So let's go back. Okay, so Genesis 33. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked in astonishment at one another. Then he took servings to them from before him, but Benjamin's serving was 5 times as much as any of theirs. So they drank and were merry with him. So they sit down, and they're in astonishment. The brothers looked at one another in astonishment because these Egyptians had seated them in birth order. It wasn't the boys seating themselves. They got told where to sit. So they're kind of stunned. How did they put us in this birth order seating?
Like a coincidence?
Yeah, that's what they're wondering. It's like, that's awfully odd. Why are we seated from Benjamin to Reuben? What's going on here? And then on top of it, suddenly young Benjamin's getting all the goodies.
More.
He's more of the goodies. He's getting 5 times. Literally, they're saying 5 times as much. He's got this heap. He can't even eat it all. It's like, what's he going to do with all that? So, a lot of the commentators said that they feel that this is really, and I kind of agree, it's a test.
And
That this is another test. The reason you're giving him 5 times as much is Joseph's checking out what these boys do. Because you remember what happened with Joseph when he got more? He got the inheritance, he got the coat. What did they do? They got jealous, they tried to kill him, tried to throw him in the pit, and then they sold him as a slave as their last result. So here Joseph is like, oh, let's see how, yeah, let's see if they'll do this to Benjamin since he's my brother. He's the young, the child of Rachel. So Joseph remembers how he was treated for receiving more than his brothers many years ago and puts them to the same test with Benjamin.
I never thought
a
of that.
message from Chris. She somehow got kicked off or something happened, so she's not able to see or hear. So love all you guys. Catch up with you next week. It's probably my internet.
Well, say hi to Blanca. Hi, Blanca.
Oh, hi, Blanca! Yay, Blanca made it.
Blanca made it. She didn't make it here, but she made it there. So, oh, what happened? Did I flip
Hey,
pages?
don't go yet.
Don't go
I
yet.
had to receive her
Receive, oh.
while I'm receiving. I can probably call you.
Okay, so this is like test 2 that these boys have been put through by Joseph, right? First we lock up Simeon, you got to go home and get Benjamin, and then, the whole silver's got to be brought back. And now they're getting tested with, well, how will you treat Benjamin if he's given more? He's trying to find out where their hearts really are at. Have they grown up? Have they matured? Have they stopped being jealous and selfish and greedy? God does the same thing with us. He sometimes tests us over and over again on the same subject because we sometimes have a weak area that needs some work. For me, over the years, it has always been financial. My weakness is I don't like not knowing if the money's coming in. I want to know that things are going to be taken care of. And I get worked up about it. So for me, it was always, it's like the head knowledge, God will provide. But then the trial comes and you start getting a little weak. You start thinking about all the what ifs. You start trying to take it into your own hands, fix the problem yourself. And so God over the years has retested me, and each trial I've grown in faith. And I can also look back on those trials and see how He's taken care of me and provided, and it makes my faith stronger the next time a trial like that hits. So I'm thankful that I'm probably not perfect yet, but I have made progress, and I'm sure all you have your weak areas where everybody has something different that they have a tough time with it. So God's going to bring tests in our lives to work on our maturity, to grow, to bring character to us, to perfect us. That's the whole point, of these trials, to see where our heart is, to see how our faith is doing. So He's testing these boys the same way as Joseph represents God, so He's testing these boys in the same manner. Proverbs 17:3 says, "The refining pot is for silver, and the furnace is for gold, but the Lord tests the hearts." He's going to test us. James 1:2-4 says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." And James 1:12 says, "Blessed is the man who endures temptation, for when he has been approved, He will receive the crown of life which the Lord has promised to those who love him. There are rewards and blessings when we pass our test. Just the fact that we've either grown closer to God is a blessing in itself, a reward in itself. So, testing our faith should produce growth in our faith and in our character. We should either be growing in patience, growing in kindness, growing in our gentleness, whatever fruit, or character trait needs to come out, God's going to grow it in us. Everybody got it? Okay, so back to where we were. Then he took servings to them before him, but Benjamin's serving was 5 times as much as any of theirs, so they drank and were merry with him. So how did the boys react?
Graciously.
Very great. They didn't go after Benjamin. They didn't say, "Hey, what's up, buddy?" Didn't yell at.
Pass back that meat.
Yeah, they they didn't.
Got
They,
too much.
They didn't dive bomb him and beat him up or anything. They just drank and were merry. They had a good time. They rejoiced and enjoyed the feast. So it looks like they've maybe matured a little bit. They've started to change, which is a good sign for Joseph to see this, to see his brother not be abused. So this feast set before the brothers in the middle of a famine, because remember, they're all in the middle of a famine. They're having a feast in Egypt, is a foreshadow of the table that God spreads for Israel during their time in the wilderness. As we've talked about this before, the brothers and Jacob, they represent Israel in a lot of the foreshadowings. And so there's going to come a time when Israel's in the middle of the wilderness with no food, no water, and they're going to have to depend on God to set a feast for them while they're in the wilderness. He's going to give them water and manna and pheasants at one point. He's going to provide for them in the middle of the wilderness. So this Joseph providing for them in the middle of this famine is a foreshadow of what's to come. So Psalm 78 says, "And they tested God in their heart by asking for the food of their fancy. Yes, they spoke against God. They said, 'Can God prepare a table in the wilderness?' So behold, he struck the rocks so that the waters gushed out and the streams overflowed. Can he give bread also? Can he provide meat for his people?" They were always questioning God. Therefore the Lord heard this and was furious. So fire was kindled against Jacob, and anger came up against Israel, because they did not believe in God and did not trust his salvation. So there's a consequence for not trusting. They faced several issues because of their lack of belief. But he did spread the table for them. He did provide for them in the wilderness where there was no food for them. And there were a lot of them. He miraculously fed. So we need these biblical accounts of how God provides during difficult times to bolster our faith when needed. How many people know the word bolster?
What'd you say?
How many people know the word bolster?
Food for the what?
The word bolster.
Oh, yeah, bolster.
So I'm thinking the younger ones don't know the word bolster
Oh.
because you don't hear it anymore. You don't hear people say that anymore.
I've never heard it before.
See, you're younger.
You're too young. That's
You're a few years younger than me. They probably stopped using it between you and me somewhere. It means strengthen or support. It builds up. It supports you. That's why the bolster pillows. Oh, maybe you don't know that either.
Oh, yeah.
I used to be on couches and chairs. They would support you. I'm living in the past again, Carolyn. I'm saying words people don't know.
I get in trouble when I say stuff.
So they've passed at least 2 tests now, but next time there's coming another test. It's not over with yet for these guys. So we'll learn about that next time.